Mr. Minister, welcome on our program and thank you so much for this time. It's been about 2 years since our last meeting and our last interview, and so far I can't see really real strategy of solving the crisis or challenges that the EU is facing right now. Yeah? And the challenges still remain. Even we are facing this kind of rising up of the polarization inside the EU Parliament right now after the elections. So in that regard, first of all, within this kind of challenges, within this kind of crisis, let's start talking about the Georgians' prospects of integration inside the EU. Again, in this concept of the crisis of European Union's integrity, let's say so.
Look, you are right. The European Union has been faced with historic type of challenges. If you put into consideration Brexit, energy security, migration, threat of terror, war in Ukraine, the struggle regarding the Eurasian cooperation, lack of enlargement. So all these are historic challenges. And you should not be surprised that in case of facing historic challenges, you have historic type of debates. The problem is not the fact that we do have debates, because that should be taken into consideration as normal under such kind of circumstances. The problem is that these debates go emotional immediately. These debates are not standing on the basis of common sense. These debates end up in stigmatizing each other, and this debate ends up in let's say, insulting those who are not representing the mainstream. Yeah. This is our biggest concern here, that we have to understand that in a democracy there can and there must be debates. And by definition, in a debate, there are entities, like in the case of EU countries, forming a majority and others belonging to a minority. But just because of belonging to a minority regarding a question, they should not be, stigmatized as non-European, right? So these debates are there, definitely. These debates went emotional, and these debates led to a polarization in Europe. And of course these debates are heated by let's say, personal ambitions as well, as the top jobs of the European Union are now being fulfilled. And when personal issues are at stake, personal ambitions, careers are being at stake, then debates can be overheated. And now this is what we are faced with. Additionally to that, the migration crisis has not been resolved yet. A huge debate still how to overcome. A group of countries, including the Western Europeans, are pushing still for an obligatory quota of redistribution of migrants. They want to manage the migration instead of stopping the migration. And the group of Central European countries are representing another position, which is to stop the migration, which is to protect the borders, and which is to make it sure that the only way to come to Europe is the legal way. And this debate is tough as well, and this debate is ruling the agenda.
So in that regard, Georgia is totally modern European country, because we have also the stigmatization, personal attitudes towards the political issues and something like that. And okay, in that regard, maybe we can say that there are prospects for the integration for the Georgia into the EU. But let's talk about the Hungarians' position about the top jobs. You highlighted this issue, and this was quite tough process of electing the personalities on the top jobs, and I know that the Hungarian, with its partners in the Visegrad countries, we are opposed to the Netherlands candidate on the president of the Commission. What is your position regarding the new nominee, the German representative?
Well, first of all, we consider the position of President of European Commission as the most important one. And that's why we have paid special attention to this issue. And you know, we are members of the European People's Party, and we did support the candidate, Manfred Weber, until he made a very rough statement on Hungarians. He said that if it depends on the votes of the Hungarians, he does not want to become the president of the European Commission, which is a very serious insult against the Hungarian people, because such kind of a statement shows that he considers Hungarians as less valuable than any other European nations. This is unacceptable. So after this statement...
So why you supported him?
We did not. We supported him as a president of the European Commission until this statement of his. Then we have withdrawn our support. Then the next candidate was Frans Timmermans, a Dutch socialist, whom we totally rejected, because he's a person who never pays respect to member states. He never pays respect to nations of the European Union. He's a bureaucrat in Brussels. He wants to weaken the member states and strengthen Brussels. This is something that we totally reject. We think that a strong European Union must be based on strong member states. So that's why we rejected him. We didn't support him. And finally, the German Minister of Defense, Ursula von der Leyen, became a candidate whom we support. She has always represented a fair and balanced approach towards member states, towards nations in the European Union. So that can be a guarantee for a cooperation or a relationship based on mutual respect. This is the most important condition of ours, that all holders of top jobs in the European Union must base their approach towards the member states on mutual respect.
So again, and you mentioned about the EPP, your suspension within the EPP. What is Hungary doing right now? I mean, is it looking for the future cooperation with the EPP, or maybe you are searching for the cooperation with other, let's call them the Eurosceptic parties which entered to the European Union's parliament?
Look, we are now the most successful party of the European People's Party. We received 53% of the votes in Hungary on the European elections, 53%. This is way the highest result, way the best result in the European Parliament elections among all member states, where more than 2 parties are running for the seats. So this has to be a factor in the debate about our future in the EPP. I have to tell you one thing. Whether we stay or leave, it only depends on our own decision. When we joined the European People's Party, upon the invitation of late German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, the EPP was located totally in another position regarding the political spectrum. Now, since EPP has spent multiple terms in coalition with the socialists, it has transformed the focus of EPP, and it has moved more to the left, which is unacceptable for us. So what we are urging now for is that EPP should not open more towards the left, towards liberals, towards Greens, but we should open more to successful patriotic parties, like the one of Salvini in Italy, Lega, like the one of Kaczynski in Poland, Law and Justice. So we should cooperate with these parties which gained a lot of public support back at home, which are patriotic. This is what we are pushing for. And we are pushing for the migratory policy of EPP to be changed. And instead of aiming to manage migration, let's aim to stopping the migration and protecting the borders. And we will see whether these endeavors of ours will be successful or not, and then we will decide whether we stay or we leave the EPP.
Do you believe that it will be succeeded?
Well, we hope. I mean, that's why I say that we are the most successful party of EPP, and if you represent a democratic approach, then you cannot distance yourself from the will of the people.
Definitely. So let's go back to the crisis. I mean, do you feel that these new top jobs, these new approaches, maybe which will be presented by the new top leaders of the European Union, could solve or could present any kind of solution to this kind of challenges? Is this kind of debates right now on the floor when we are waiting for the votes elections in the parliament about the top jobs?
Look, It is very important how the new Commission will be set up. So it depends on the personalities and the political approaches of the commissioners themselves. And it depends a lot on the prime ministers and presidents of the member states, because see, the European Council must be the political body. So that was a misunderstanding by Jean-Claude Juncker, that he operated the European Commission as a political body, which is totally unacceptable, number one, and number two, which is totally against the European treaties, because the European treaties say that the political body of the European Union is the European Council, consisting of, the presidents and prime ministers of the member states. And the European Commission should be the so-called guardian of the treaties, meaning an operative body. And that must not be changed, So number one. Number two, we hope that the new Commission will represent a more open approach when it comes to external partnerships of the European Union. So we are a country which represents a pro-enlargement position. We think that the EU can only be stronger if it enlarges. We are very frustrated by the fact that enlargement policy has been stopped. We think that the more member states there are in the European Union, the stronger the European Union will be. We are pushing for a more enhanced Eastern Partnership program, where countries of the Eastern Partnership could be addressed by tailor-made solutions, because we understand there are 6 different countries, 6 different aspirations, 6 different starting points, So we would like to see European Union more open to these external partnerships. And I think that if we are more open to these external partnerships, we can be more successful in the future.
Can you see that the new commissioner about the foreign affairs could lead the European Union towards the enlargement? Yeah. Is he really so excited to do that?
Look, I know the Spanish foreign minister very well, Mr. Borrell, who is supposed to be the next high representative, the so-called foreign minister of the European Union. And I have very positive experience with him. He's a socialist, but I have a very positive experience, because he shows respect towards public will. So he had very critical stance on Hungary, for example. Then I invited him, he came, he had a conversation with the Prime Minister, he had a lengthy negotiation with me, and then afterwards he still said that he does not really agree what we are doing, but he understood that this is based on the will of the Hungarian people. And it's no one else but the Hungarian people to determine the policy of the Hungarian government. So he respects the public will of the respective member states, and this is very important. And I think he's more open to enlargement, he's more open to external partnership programs like Eastern Partnership or the partnership with the Western Balkans, so I think we can have good hopes with him occupying the position of the High Representative.
So let's move to I suppose one of the important issues right now in inside Europe and its Europe's future is the kind of debate between the mainstreams and between the people who are thinking in the different approaches. For instance, you are quite frequently criticized for the democracy level or something like that, and on the other hand, you are criticizing the liberals and liberal democracy from your perspective. Recently, we were hearing the full hysteria in the liberal media and the mainstream media because of the statements of Mr. Putin about the liberalism, that liberalism is ended and something like that. What is that about? Is it kind of struggle to self-salvation from the liberals, or is it kind of really they have to survive or something like that? What we are facing right now in that regard?
Well, you're right. In the European Union, there's a tough debate between those who represent the mainstream and those who represent other types of positions. You have described these kind of positions just in your recent question as Eurosceptic. I would say, we are in favor of European Union. We are in favor of strong European Union. But the way the European Union operates now must be reformed. So arguing in favor of a different way of operation of the Brussels bureaucracy in order to make European Union strong is not Euroscepticism. We are a small country in the heart of Europe with a very open economy. Our export over GDP ratio is 86.5%. 79% of those go to the European Union as exports. So if there's a country which is interested in a strong and competitive European Union, it's us. And that's why we are arguing in favor of reforms. That's why we are arguing against the proposals of the French president regarding tax harmonization, regarding communizing of debts. We are against that. And we are in favor of a competitive European Union which allows its member states to compete, to make the necessary structural reforms, to cut taxes, so to be competitive. Now, when it comes to democracy, you know, we are criticized there like hell, but this is all because of migration. Because we do not represent the mainstream there. We have proved, which was denied by all Western European member states, that migration is stoppable. Because we have built a fence on our border, we deployed police, we deployed troops, we spent more than €1 billion so far, and we were able to stop the migration. If we had not built the fence there, hundreds of thousands or even millions of further illegal migrants would have entered the territory of the EU and would have gone to Germany, basically. So with that, we have taken off a lot of burden from the shoulders of the Germans. And when it comes to democracy itself, you know, Hungary is a country where the people are very sensitive on democracy and freedom. Why? Because our history is full of struggle for freedom. We had to suffer under a communist regime until 1990. So we have been enjoying freedom from 1990 onwards, which is around 30 years. So it's not a long period of time if you look back on history. And that's why, believe me, that Hungarian people would never vote in favor of a political force anymore which would take away rights or which would harm democracy. So since 2010, we have won all parliamentary elections. 2018, last year, we have gained record support. We occupy 2/3 of the seats in parliament on our own, based on the will of the people. And decision of the people of a country must not be challenged or questioned by anyone else, especially not from outside of the country. And when it comes to, you know, democracy, liberal democracy, whatever, you know, the liberals in Europe usually consider a political system as non-democracy if they do not win the elections. You know, so the liberals only consider a country as democratic if it's them to win. If the people decide in another way, then they consider it immediately as a non-democracy. Now, this is a very anti-democratic approach, I guess.
Definitely. And do you feel that the trends in Europe are in support of your visions? I mean, in support of the rising up the visions against the mainstream?
Look, I think figures are telling. And if you look at the outcome of the European Parliament elections, you will see that the top 4 parties, from the perspective of public support, was Fidesz from Hungary, 53%, Law and Justice from Poland, 46%, Österreichische Volkspartei from Austria, Austrian People's Party, 37%, and Lega from Italy, 34%. So this shows that these parties, which speak openly, straightforward, honestly, parties which leave behind hypocrisy and political correctness, are more and more supported by the people, and more successful. So this should be taken into consideration. When it comes to Central Europe, we have a very strong alliance there, which is called the Visegrad Alliance. Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary. Historically, deeply rooted cooperation, a historically deeply rooted and a very successful alliance. And this remained united. And we were able to push through our ideas, our plans, our positions, regardless that one by one we would be small to do so. But together we are strong enough. And if you look at the figures again, you will see that these countries overperform currently the European average when it comes to economy. Our growth rate of GDP is twice higher compared to the European average, you know. So we are becoming a powerhouse, a growth engine of the European Union. So we don't have to be shy not to take part in the common decisions.
You might know the internal situations here, recent internal situations here. In that regard, I would like to ask you about the Russian-EU relations. I can see that the relations between the EU and Russia is somehow the pragmatic, and it's based on the kind of pragmatic solutions or cooperation or something like that. What you can say about when again, local liberals and the European liberals, they are presenting the right-wing parties and so-called nationalist or patriotic parties as the pro-Putinist or pro-Russian, and you mentioned already these kind of cliches which are used against the political opponents and so on and so on. If we are facing really rising up this kind of patriotic and pro-sovereignty parties inside the European Union, what kind of relations could become with the EU and Russia? What that really means?
There's a big hypocrisy there. There's a big hypocrisy. Because those countries from Western part of Europe who criticize Russia the most, who consider themselves as extremely highly developed liberals, they make the biggest businesses with the Russians. Far the biggest businesses.
Same is here.
Look at France. The trade volume between France and Russia has been increased by 45% during the last 2 years. Look at Germany. They have increased their trade with Russia with 29% during the last 2 years. Gazprom is building Nord Stream 2 together with the biggest Western European energy companies. On the Russian Energy Week, President Putin was sitting on the stage with the CEOs of the 4 biggest Western European energy companies who made a competition who can praise the Russian energy policy more. You know, so it's a big hypocrisy there. If you go along the corridors of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, you will hear more people speaking Western European languages than Russian. So in this regard, I can tell you that there's a big hypocrisy, and Western European countries make very big businesses with Russia. Now, we don't envy that, but we reject the double standards, that they criticize Russia, they criticize Central European countries who speak openly about that, and in the meantime, they make big business with Russia. So what we think is that yes, there is a need for a pragmatic Eurasian cooperation. Yes, there is a need for a pragmatic EU-Russia dialogue. But in the meantime, rest assured that we are absolutely standing up for the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Georgia. And I really do believe that Georgia should be provided with the membership action plan of NATO. And I just told Minister Zalkaliani that I turn with a letter to the Secretary General of NATO to hold the NATO-Georgia committee meeting in September on the margins of the NATO Foreign Ministerial meeting.
So, and finally, let's go back to the first question. I mean, prospects of Georgia for the integration into Euro-Atlantic unions, I mean, NATO, European Union, and so on. In that regard, what we already talked. Mm-hmm.
Look, here we are absolutely in favor of enlargement, both NATO and the EU. And we really do believe that you deserve progress in this regard. DCFTA has helped a lot. We respect your achievement, and we respect the fact that 870 Georgian troops are there taking part in the Resolute Support Mission in Afghanistan. We think you deserve membership action plan to be activated. We will be pushing for that, and we will be pushing for positive feedback on behalf of EU and NATO as well, because you have performed in this direction. We know very well that if there's no positive feedback, then your people will raise the question why you are going forward with the European and NATO agenda if you don't get any kind of positive feedback. So we are on your side, you can be sure about that.
Mr. Minister, thank you so much for coming and for this time. So, nice to
Thank you very much.